go. You can see here we have a standard PS1, an SPCH 5501, where the laser's on the right hand side, and it's in pretty good nick, but we're going to discard this shell and do a bit of a teardown. Use the same shell for a different part of the video for a mod for Tyler Lyle, so it'll be a double build. But yeah, let's get turning it over and we'll start looking into it and begin our teardown.
The PlayStation announced to the world in a manner that shattered Sega's lead in the home console market and forever crippled their chances of dominating it. The console brought Sony roaring into the console wars with a force not quite seen since the meteoric rise of Nintendo in the prior decade. Sony's triumphant entry into the console market almost wasn't. Sony had always been hesitant about entering the console hardware market. They had tried once before, but Sony was burned in a deal very publicly by Nintendo. So for a time, Sony was content just making chips and other parts for consoles, and not weighing into the fray with a full console. But thanks to the valiant efforts of Ken Kutaragi, the PlayStation was pushed forward within Sony, and Sony was convinced to launch the system on their own. Sony, along with poached staff from Sega and Nintendo, took the home console market in a spectacular display of marketing and knowing where the gaming industry was headed in the mid to late 90s. The home gaming realm had been mostly dominated by 2D game styles. There were 3D games, but they were not the main staples of the home console experience. The PlayStation was the first affordable home console to provide a smooth 3D experience at a price point that could be obtainable by the American consumer. Systems like the 3DO were the first, but its significantly higher price point often kept it out of the hands of your average gamer, and instead into the realm of hi-fi electronics. The PlayStation brought the high-end brand of Sony to the game space, and it worked. Sony did what no large company had done before. It dethroned the established game makers, and began to rule the space. NEC had tried years before with the TurboGrafx 16 in North America, and failed dramatically because they didn't give the system the support it needed to make even a dent. The PlayStation, on the other hand, was given resources that no other company was willing to match. Sega even went as far as to launch their Saturn console early to try and beat the PlayStation to market, but that only had the result of alienating Sega from a large number of retailers, and all but guaranteeing the Saturn's defeat to the PlayStation in North America. The PlayStation had a 3D focus, which made it stand out among the consoles it faced off against. The system was built with 3D in mind. It made it so the system was much easier for third-party developers to make games for it, so it ended up drawing a much larger level of support. The Saturn, on the other hand, was a very reactionary design to the PlayStation. The Saturn was built originally as a 2D powerhouse. Once the specs of the PlayStation came out, Sega began attaching more chips to the Saturn to try and make it match the PlayStation. But that had the result of the system being more difficult to make games for. And the clear winner of that situation became the PlayStation, with many former Sega loyalists jumping to the new Sony platform. The PlayStation went on to dominate that generation of consoles, and it also established Sony as one of the dominant forces. The original PlayStation went on to sell well over 100 million units, and established Sony as one of the key players in the game industry.
Right, so after cleaning up all the pads on this board, we're going to be shooting over to making the mod chip work. Okay, so this is the Multi-Mode 3, and this is a mod chip designed for the PlayStation 1. And what it does is it makes it region free and also able to play your backup games. So we'll get into installing this, and this will be a nice accompaniment to the HDMI mod and the other things that we're doing with this.
As usual, this is a one-man infiltration mission.
Weapons and equipment OSP?
Yes, this is a top-secret black op. Don't expect any official support.
Hey guys, Rocker Gaming here. So I've been working with Jared on a few different projects, and he mentioned to me that he needed some custom buttons for an awesome PS1. And after he told me a little bit more about the project, I was in. No questions asked. So for those of you who might not be aware, I do all kinds of molding and casting on my channel, and we use it to make custom parts for video game controllers and consoles. And this is no exception. We're going to make a mold and we're going to cast some custom PS1 buttons in an awesome clear to match this crystal PS1. Now unfortunately my PS1 controller that I'm using here is used, and that means the buttons are a little scratched up. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and buff out all the scratches from those buttons, because whenever you're doing molding and casting, every little detail is captured in that mold and it'll show up in your final resin casted button. So we're going to clean these up, we're going to make them look really nice and shiny, and we're going to get them ready to get in our mold box and ultimately make the copies of them. Okay, with those buttons all cleaned up and in our mold box, it's time to use some silicone to go ahead and make our mold. Now I'm going to use some platinum based silicone from Alumilite. This is Plat 40. It works absolutely fantastic, and we're going to mix it 1:1 by volume and pretty much just dump it all over our buttons. It's a pretty easy process, so let's get these poured up, mixed, and into the mold box. Now in the mold box you're going to see some cut up blue pieces. That's just basically old silicone that I'm reusing. That's the beauty of silicone. It really doesn't stick to anything except other silicone, so you can go ahead and recycle it and use it in new molds. Okay, with the first half of the mold done, it's time to pour the second. Basically a rinse and repeat of what we just did. The only thing you gotta do is make sure you use plenty of mold release, because like I said, we don't want that silicone sticking to itself, and we're trying to make a mold and not a silicone brick. Now I unfortunately ran out of that Alumilite Plat 40, but it's no big deal. I happen to have some of this Mold Star 30 from Smooth On, and this stuff works absolutely fantastic as well. So to make these nice clear buttons, we're going to use some of this Alumilite clear resin. This is a urethane based resin that you mix 1:1 by weight. It's extremely easy to use, and it turns out you get crystal clear parts when it's all said and done. With the resin all mixed up, next we're going to go ahead and take a syringe and inject the resin into our molds. And yeah, after that we're going to get it into the pressure pot and let these things sit at about 60 psi pressure. Well, after all that work, it's time for the best part, which is cracking these molds open and seeing how these buttons turned out. And honestly, they look pretty great. And I think they're going to look fantastic on this crystal PS1 controller. Well, Jared, my work is finished here. It's all up to you now, man.
Alright, so what I got here is some crystal clear buttons made by Rocker Gaming Mods. Now what I'll do is I'll link his channel down in the description below. He's an absolute legend when it comes to controller mods. Does all his own buttons and shell casting, so he's made me these so that we can have the LEDs mounted inside them and shine through the controller to go with that whole crystal aesthetic. So we'll disassemble the controller and start mounting the LEDs so that they work in line with this. Alright, let's get going.
Snake. Colonel, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. What's the situation, Snake?
Looks like the elevator in the back is the only way up.
Just as I expected. You'll have to take the elevator to the surface, but make sure nobody sees you. If you need to, contact me by codec.
in this maze, but I could love you forever if you'd meet my gaze.